cost, what would be the fixed cost, what's the variable cost, what's the total cost. So we're going to talk about if we have any type of a transportation system, there is a cost per day versus the volume of traffic. So volume of traffic as the x-axis and cost. So there is a cost which we call that fixed cost. So this is a fixed cost. So for instance, when you're building a highway, you incur a fixed cost. So the cost doesn't matter how many cars going on the freeway, you're going to build that freeway and you're going to incur the cost. So that's fixed. And so volume of traffic doesn't change it. But we have what we call variable cost that depends on the volume of traffic. And that goes up as the volume of traffic increases. So this is called variable cost. So we call variable cost. So as the volume of traffic increases, the variable cost goes up. Because if you remember last time I said part of the transportation cost is time cost. So if you have too much traffic, obviously it takes longer for people to be on the freeway. Therefore, that time cost increases as the volume of traffic increase. And plus, if you have more cars on the roadway, there are more maintenance costs of the pavement and so on. So that will be a variable cost. And what would be the total cost? The total costs are this curve. This is the total cost curve. So we could just write here that total cost of X, because depends on the X. X is the volume of traffic, is equal to fixed cost, which is not depends on the X, plus the variable cost, which is depend on the X, correct? So total cost is equal to fixed cost plus variable cost. Any question on that? Now, there's another cost that we have to be aware of, which we are using a lot in the transportation, called average cost. So the average cost which is dependent on the X, is equal actually to the total cost of X divided by X, which is actually equal to fixed cost divided by X plus the variable cost of X divided by X, correct? Now, let me give you an example. So the average cost is per vehicle. How much would be the cost per vehicle on the freeway? So let me give you another example of the average cost and total cost, which is not related to transportation. Let's assume you go out and try to buy a dozen pencils from bookstore. So when you want to buy them, they said that it will cost you $1.20 to buy a dozen pencil. So what would be your total cost?
$1,200.
How much?
1,200.
1,200?
No, 120.
$1.20, correct? $1.20. $1.20 is your total cost, correct? And what would be your average cost? A dozen pencil, what would be your average cost per pencil?
10 cents.
10 cents, correct? So your X is 12, correct? So you divide your $1.20 by 12 pencils, so you get 10 cents per pencil. So that's your average cost, correct? Any question on that? So that's the total cost and average cost. Now, there is another cost that we have to be aware of. It's called marginal cost. Marginal cost. And marginal cost is the cost of additional unit. So it is total cost of X minus total cost of X minus 1. So that's called marginal cost. So it means that what would be the cost of additional unit? Now, in case of the pencils that I just gave you that example, if you tell the guy that I need 13 pencils instead of 12, well, there are two cases. One, the guy said, well, I don't sell the pencil, I just sell them by dozen. If that would be the case, what would be your marginal cost? If the guy said, I only sell by dozen, but you need the one extra pencil, how much would be your marginal cost?
120.
$1.20, because although you only need one, but you have to pay $1.20 to get another dozen and just take one of them, right? So that would be $1.20. Or if the guy said that, well, since you bought a dozen, I give you one free. So what would be your marginal cost?
0.
0, right? 0. So that is what the marginal cost is. Now, in the traffic and transportation, we have an average cost that incur, which is total cost divided by X. But if you add one more car to the freeway, that might cause the average cost to go up because it causes more traffic. So sometimes that marginal cost is very expensive. So somehow they try to prevent that extra cost by coming to the freeway. So they put a price on that. We call that congestion pricing. Now, if you're looking at the graph of that, this is the situation that if your average cost goes down, okay, if your average cost goes down, is because your marginal cost is going down. So your average cost goes down because your marginal cost is going down. So this is your average cost, and this is your marginal cost. Why? If marginal cost goes down, it pulls the average cost down. Just look at the example that I just gave you. If the guy give you one more pencil for free, which means your marginal cost is 0. Your average cost was 10 cents, correct? If he gives you that extra pencil for free, what would be your average cost?
Like 9 cents.
Okay, because your average cost was $1.20 divided by 12 pencils, correct? And that give you what, 10 cents, correct? Now, he give you one pencil free, so your marginal cost was 0. But you got 13 pencils, correct? So your average cost will be $1.20 divided by 13 pencils, correct? So it will be about 9 cents and some, correct? So it will be less than your average cost. So your marginal cost, when it gets to be less than your average cost, it pull the average cost lower. So this is marginal cost is coming down and pushing the average cost down. But when it starts going up, the average cost goes up. So if the marginal cost, if he tell you that he's selling by dozen, and then you have to pay $2.40 for 13 pencils, right? So then it will be much higher than 10 cents. So your average cost goes up. Why? Because your marginal cost was higher. Everyone understand the concept? So that extra unit is very important. What is the cost of that? If the cost of marginal cost, which is the extra unit, is less than average cost, you push the average cost down, which we have it in this case here. But if the marginal costs start going up, the average cost goes up. So this is the point that we want to stop. We don't want the average cost goes up, especially on the freeway, because average cost mostly is related to the time you spend on the freeway. So that causes congestion. So we try to prevent that extra unit to come to the freeway because the cost of that extra unit is a lot. So when you hear about congestion pricing on the freeway, that's what they are trying to do. Trying to prevent those extra cars coming into the freeway by pricing them, discouraging them to come, because it makes the average cost of all the vehicle to go up. Another thing is, let's say you have a shoe manufacturing and your capacity of manufacturing of the shoes is 1 million pair of shoes. That's your full capacity. So if you produce 1 million pair of shoes, your average cost is a certain amount. But if somebody ordered one more pair of shoes, instead of 1 million, say 1,000,001, then for that extra pair of shoes, you have to go and buy more machineries and hire more labor to make that one pair of shoes. And that will be very costly. So your marginal cost is very high, is much higher than your average cost. So that's where you stop. You do not take that order because you say that's not worth it. For that extra pair, I have to spend too much money on it. So that's the relationship between average cost and marginal cost. Any question on that? All right. The next thing we want to do is talk about, on chapter 10 of your textbook, we talk about evaluation. Of alternative. Transportation system. Okay. Now, this part is pretty much engineering economics. I am assuming that most of you have had engineering economic class. Is there anyone in the class that has not had engineering economics? You have it, okay? Are you a junior?
I'm a sophomore.
Sophomore, okay. You guys should have taken that engineering economics. Actually, as a sophomore, maybe you shouldn't have even taken a transportation class, but that's okay. But anyway, I will go over this, and we have to do what we did in the engineering economics with a little bit of a different problems. Okay, I will pretty much go over that. So what we want to do by evaluation of alternative transportation system is that if we have 2 or 3 alternative design for a freeway, for instance, and we want to know which one we should do, which makes sense economically, we do economic analysis on each alternative, and we try to find the one that is most beneficial to us. So among 3 or 4 alternatives, we can choose one that is more economical. And that's what we're going to learn. There are different methods of evaluation. And we will talk about each method. And there is a problem associated with those methods in your chapter 10. At the end of your chapter 10, there are 4 problems that we will go over each of those problems and show you how to do it. I start the problem and let you finish it and use that as a homework. Okay? So those are the evaluation method that we are going to use. The first one we're going to do, we call present worth analysis. By the way, if you are interested in taking engineering economics during summer, I'm teaching it. You can register for it. It's a good time to take that class, especially if you want to just later on get into the senior design projects. You need to have that as that's a prerequisite. So you got to take them as soon as possible. Okay. And I teach that class during summertime. So if you are interested, you should register as soon as possible, or any other summer classes if you are interested to take. And you should register as soon as possible. The reason is that the summer program are different than fall and spring, is conducted by independent agency, which is part of Cal State, but if they don't make any profit on the class, they cancel it. And so we have to get enough students for them to keep the class. Otherwise, they cancel the class. And usually they determine that by May 15. So you have 2 weeks. So if you are interested in taking any classes during summer, you should register as soon as possible, because if you don't, they might cancel the class. Okay, so I'm teaching actually this class, transportation, and I'm teaching the engineering economics. I'm scheduled to teach it if we get enough students. If we don't, we will cancel that. All right. So anyway, so one of the methods that we use is present worth analysis. The second method that we're going to discuss is called annual method. And the third method we call rate of return analysis. And the fourth method is the benefit cost ratio analysis. And the fifth method is cost effectiveness. Okay, so these are the 5 methods that we're going to discuss in the next session or 2. Okay, so before I do that, for those of you who have not had engineering economics, or those of you who have had it a few semesters ago and you forgot, I'm going to review the fundamental of the engineering economics, which is related to these methods. Without those, you cannot really do any of those methods. The first thing I want to talk about is that for everything that we do, there will be an interest involved. There's 2 ways of calculating interest. One is calculating on a simple interest. And the next one is a compound interest. All right. Now, on simple interest, you probably have had that type of a calculation in the high school. If you have $1,000, okay, and let's say you put them at the bank, and the bank pay you 12% interest per year. And if you leave it for 5 years, you want to know how much money you have at the end of 5 years. So $1,000 times 12% interest, you get $120 interest times 5 years. Okay, that makes it $600 plus your original amount of money that you put in, 1,000. So it give you what? $1,600. So that's how you calculate how much money you're going to have at the end. So you multiply 1,000, which we call present amount, P, by your interest, which we call it I, and times 5 period or 5 years, which we call it N. And then you add your original amount that you put in, which is the P. So that will be, if you factor it, that will be P times 1 plus IN. So that's how we do simple interest. Any question on that? But simple interest, we hardly use it because every agency like to do compound interest. Because on compound interest, let's say $1,000 that you make 12%, you make $120 in the first year. So what they do in the second year, they don't use 1,000 as the principal. They use 1,120 because you already got $120 interest added to your 1,000, so that's 1,120, and then you multiply that by 0.12. So it will be more because you get interest on interest. That's compound interest. Now to calculate that, let's say that you have year 1, year 2, year 3, and then you go year N. what would be your cash flow? On year one, actually that will be years, let's say year zero. On year zero, let's say you have $1,000. Year zero is right now. After 1 year, and we call that P. After 1 year, you will have your P, which is your 1,000 plus interest. And that interest will be PI, correct? Which is actually 1,000 plus 1,000 times 0.12. It will give you $1,120, correct? So after 1 year, that's how much you will have, 1,120. How much would you have in year two? Well, in year two, what would be your principal? Your principal, then what we write here this, we make this into P and we factor it 1 plus I to the power of 1. Okay, that's for the first year. The second year, your principal is not 1,000, it's 1,120. That's the amount you have, and you got to get interest on that, which is actually P times 1 plus I to the power of 1. So this is your principal, P times 1 plus I to the power of 1. That's your principal. And then you have to multiply it by interest to get your interest. So if I factor this, it will be P times 1 plus I to the power of 2. Okay? Everybody understand that? So the third year, again, your principal will be 1 plus P times 1 plus I to the power of 2. And then you have to multiply by interest, the same thing. So your amount will be P times 1 plus I to the power of 3. So on the nth year, you will have P times 1 plus I to the power of n minus 1, because it's 1 year before, that's your principal, plus P times 1 plus I to the power of n minus 1 times I, and that will give you the amount we call it future, that is P times 1 plus I to the power of n. So that means anytime you want to find out how much money you will have in the account, which is your future, you have to put the present amount and multiply it by 1 plus I, which is your interest, and then n is the number of periods. So n is the number of periods. And then I is the interest per period. So if interest is per year, n got to be number of years. If interest is per month, n got to be number of months. If I is equal to interest per day, n should be number of days. So this is the first formula that you have to learn, which is the basic formula for engineering economics. Now, from that formula, we can use and find the present amount. So if you want to find the present amount, you multiply the F by 1 plus I to the power of minus n, which comes from the same formula. So this shows you the present amount if you have the future amount. For instance, if you want to have a $10,000 your account 5 years from now, and you want to know how much money you should put in right now, so that will be your principal calculation. Any question on that? Okay, let me just give you a couple examples. Let's say the same problem that we have, P equal to 1,000, I equal to 12%, and N is equal to 5 years. Okay, now we want to find what would be the future under compound interest. So that will be F equal to P times 1 plus I to the power of N, as I mentioned in the last page. Your P is 1,000, and then you have 1 plus 12% per year, and you have 5 years. And if you calculate that, is $1,762. As you are seeing here, compared to 1,600 that we did simple interest, 1,762 is much higher because you get interest on interest. Any question how we did this calculation? All right. Now this is compounded annually. That means every year you get the interest on interest. You have to wait the whole year and you get your interest on top of your principal, and then you calculate that. That's what's compounded annually. Now, somebody might say, well, I want to compound them quarterly. That means every 3 months, I get my interest and put on top of my principal and have more interest. So if that will be the case, your 1,000 will be multiplied by 1 plus. Now you have to figure out what would be your interest per quarter. So interest per quarter, if you have 12% interest per year, how much is it per quarter? So you have to divide that by 4. We have 4 quarters in a year, so that will be 0.03. And how many quarters do we have in 5 years? So it will be 5 times what? 4. So if you calculate this, then you get about $1,806. As you are seeing here, again, you get more money because every 3 months you get interest on interest. Now somebody say, I want to do a monthly. So this will be 1,000. You have to find interest per month, which is 12% divided by 12, which is 1%. And then you have 5 years times 12 months. So you get 1,817. So as you see here, again, you get more money because every month you get principal. Or somebody might say that, well, I want to do them per day. That means every day I get interest at the end of the day, and I want my interest to be calculated per day. So if that will be the case, you're talking about compounded daily. So this is compounded quarterly. This is compounded monthly. And now we want to compound it daily. So if that will be the case, that will be 1,000, 1 plus 0.12 divided by 365 days. And then you have 5 years times 365. And if you calculate that, it will be 1821.8. So this is the daily. Again, you get a few dollars more if you do compounded daily. And somebody might say, no, I don't want to wait for that's your credit card actually. That's being calculated daily. And somebody say, I don't really want a daily. I want it every second. So then when this number gets to be very large and this number gets very large, we go to a different types of a formula. So we say F is equal to P times E to the power of Rn. And this is called continuous compounding. That means continuously you get interest on interest. So in this case, you will have 1,000 times E, which is 2.718. You have it in your calculator. Your interest is 0.12 times 5 years. So you end up with 1822.2. So this is the maximum amount of money that you can make out of 1,000, which if you look at 1822 versus 1,600, that's a lot. Okay, so that's how we do that. Now you can do the same thing with the present. Let's say somebody said, I want to know how much would be I have to deposit in my account in order to get 10,000. So we're looking at F times 1 plus I to the power of minus N. So that means you want to have a $10,000 in the future. So you have 1 plus 0.12, let's say annually, minus 5 years. So that will be about $5,674. That's the amount that you have to put in your bank at 12% in order to get $10,000. Any question on this? So those two formulas is the one that you really need to do most of the analysis. We usually draw a diagram for our analysis. So our diagram is this, that this is the time. This is year 0, this is year 1, this is year 2, this is year 3, and so on. Okay? And let's assume that I deposit $1,000 in my account. So every time you put if you give your money to somebody, it's always negative. So if I go to the bank and I give my money to the bank, $1,000, and that will be negative because I give my money to the bank. Even if the bank had put it in my account, still negative. Every time I go and take money out, which I receive money from somebody, is positive. So let's assume that I put $1,000 in the bank and I go and withdraw these amount of money. And then I want to know how much money is left into my account. So I go and put 300, I receive 300, I receive 500, and I receive 400. I want to know how much money left in my account. If I is equal to 12%. Okay, if I is equal to 12%. So one thing that you have to remember, you can never add or subtract any amount that happened at different period of time. For instance, I cannot add 3 and 5 and 4 together because they are different time period. It's like if I owe you $100 today, and if I tell you that I will give you 2 years from now, that $100 that I give you 2 years from now is not the same as the $100 that I owe you now. because if I give you right now, you put it in the bank, and 2 years later, you will have more money. So that's not the same $100. So you cannot add or subtract any amount that happened at different period. The only time that you can do add and subtract if it happens at the same point of time. So to find the F here, what we need to do, we need to take all this money to this point, year 4, and add and subtract to see what's the balance. Anything to the left of this diagram is the present. Anything to the right of this is the future. So this way we go to present. This way we go to the future. Okay, year 0 is right now present. Year 4 is future. Year 3 is future, and so on. So to do this problem, we have to take everything to future. So this $1,000 is present. If I want to take him to future, what do? I have two formulas I can use. F is equal to P times 1 plus I to the power of N, right? So I want to find what is my future amount of $1,000 year 4. So it will be 1,000 times 1 plus I to the power of number of years, 1, 2, 3, and 4 years. And then I have to take, and this is the negative, and I have to take $300 to the future. So I do the same thing, and that is for 3 years. 300 goes for 3 years to year 4. And then I take 500 and I take it to future. And then I will have 400 and I take him to future. So everything is to the future. And the last one will be F, which is right at that point. I don't have to do anything with it. And make that equal to 0 because the top part minus bottom part is equal to 0 because they have to balance. So you do that calculation and find what is the F is going to be. Another way that you can do this problem is that this 1 plus I plus to the power of N is calculated. And they have it a table in your engineering economics book or any table, which we call that F over P. So F over P is 1 plus I to the power of N, which I can read this F over P from the table and use it here. So the table looks like you have the N and you have the F over P here. And you have year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we need year 4, F over P, you read this number here. And that's the page that says 12%. So you have a page such as this, and you can easily read the F over P. Instead of calculating 1 plus 0.12 to the power of 4, you can read that number here and just use 1,000 times that. That's in the back of the book of the engineering economic book or any other tables, interest tables. So the formula that we use when we want to get the F and we know what the P is, all we have to do is open up parentheses and divide the unknown over known, which is F over P. And if you see that P cancel, PF equal to F. So we can use this F over P for 4 and 3 and 2 and 1 and read it from that table, which is much easier, and multiply by those numbers and get the F. Now, another way you can do them, you can take everything to present if you want. So if I take him to present, my $1,000 stands over there. Okay, now I have to bring the 300, which is the future. So 300, see that the P equal to F times 1 plus I to the power of minus N. So I have to multiply this by 1 plus I, which is 0.12, to the power of minus, I have to bring the 300 1 year, minus 1. And then plus 500 times 1 plus 0.12 to the power of minus 2. And then do the same thing, plus 500 times 1 plus 0.12 to the power of minus 3. And then plus 400 times 1 plus 0.12 to the power of minus 4. No, hold on. I brought the 300, I brought the 500, and I bring the 400. Okay, this is the extra. And then I have to bring the F. So the F will be plus F times 1 plus 0.12 to the power of 4. Okay? So then I can calculate F from here. So bring everything to this point and calculate them. Or if you look at the table, there's another column right beside the F over P called P over F. So P equal to F. I open the parentheses and I have to put P over F. So if I read the P over F from here, I can use himself 1 plus 0.12 to the power of minus 1, minus 2, minus 3, and minus 4. I can use those. Okay, so this is the fundamental of engineering tools that you need to have. You have to understand this in order to be able to do those evaluations that we're going to talk about. Any question?
Professor, I'm sorry, the line is covering the bottom. I don't know what's written.
I'm sorry?
I don't know. Can you repeat what's written at the way down after plus 500?
You mean this part here?
Yeah,
Okay, you don't see it?
yeah.
Okay, let me write it on the top. Okay, so I would put here after this minus 1,000 plus 300 times 1 plus 0.12 to the power of minus 1 plus 500 times 1 plus 0.12 to the power of minus 2. Okay, now we have to take the 400 here. I'm sorry. You have to take the 400. Okay, we have to take the 400 here. So it will be again plus 400 times 1 plus 0.12 to the power of 3 years. And then we have to take the F over here. Then plus F times 1 plus 0.12 to the power of minus 4 equal to 0. So that's the bottom part of it.
Thank you.
All right. Any other question? Okay, one more formula that you need is the formula that we need for annual. Okay, so if we have, let's say you deposit $100 each month into your account, saving account, and you do that for 5 years. So 5 years times 12 months is 60 months. And you want to know how much money you're going to have after 5 years in your account. So you deposit $100 every month for 5 years. And you want to know, if you go to the bank at the 5 years later, you want to know how much money you are supposed to have. So the way I told you to do is you have to take each of these 100 here and add them up together. So that means you have to get the future amount of 100 and then multiply by 1 plus I to the power of n and add them up together. So you have to do 60 of those. So in order to have it easier, since these amounts are the same, we call that A, because they are equal amount. So if I want to use a formula to do that, there's the easier way to do it. I said I want to find the F. And what do I have? I have the A. I know what the A is, 100. So I open the parentheses and I say, what should be the parentheses? As I said, you just put your unknown divided by known. So it will be F over A. And that will be at some interest rate and some period. So if you go to the table and you read the F over A from